And we are live. How you doing, Mets fans? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with our latest post-game segment. One I'm really excited to get into because it is headlined by, yes, Mets top starting pitching prospect Christian Scott blowing the doors open today against the Miami Marlins on national television. You could watch it on MLB Network. We have so much to say about the young right-hander and his game today, and why Mets fans have a lot of reasons to not only be optimistic, but very excited about him and the potential prospect of him hitting the bigs at some point this season. From there, we'll get into some of the offensive takeaways in the 6-3 victory over the Miami Marlins, but I really want to put a heavy emphasis in today's show on Christian Scott. Well, we saw a little bit from Edwin Diaz too, which was not the Edwin Diaz that we necessarily saw his last two times out there, and everything in between. So to everyone first chiming in live on a replay here on YouTube, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on the easiest and best way to support the channel. On Twitter, to everyone watching there as well, thank you all so much for being here. Make sure to retweet, like, all that fun stuff. Greatly appreciate. Just fair warning to all my Twitter viewers, if you want to interact here for the live show, make sure you chime into the YouTube version. I will only be interacting here with a chat for my YouTube subscribers per usual. So to everyone on Twitter, appreciate you guys watching, but the interaction will come strictly through YouTube per usual. So let's dive into this one. Before I do though, again, I appreciate everyone first chiming in live on a replay. Shout out to my amazing sponsor that you guys will hear from shortly. Thanks to BetUS as always. And I'm not trying to brag or anything, guys, but we're like 4 for 4 in our last picks here on the channel for anything betting related with BetUS, as we've been doing our individual segments for NHL plays, NBA plays, MLB futures. We have been hitting on them all lately. The futures not yet, obviously, and I will discuss the one I placed last night. That was oh so close. That was the one out of my last 5 that didn't go in the right direction. I'll break down exactly why that is, but really excited to break this one down again. Christian Scott, folks, let's just take a moment to appreciate the greatness that was a young right-hander today. Josh, how you doing? Shraken, how you doing? Nathan, Grant, Edwin, everyone first chiming in. Make sure to smash those buttons. Thank you all so much in advance, everybody. Let me see how we're doing as well on Twitter. I want to make sure everything's properly set up there as it is here. Awesome. Sweet. Love to see it. Appreciate everyone first chiming in. Give me 1 second, everybody, before we get going, and then we will go from there. I already see some people that are not necessarily loving the fact that I have the title as like Christian Scott next ace. Guys, I understand. I'm not trying to put all this pressure on his shoulders or anything like that. But as a young, excited fan who has seen Christian Scott rise the way that he did in the minor leagues last season, and I see him carve up some MLB caliber batters today against the Miami Marlins, there's a lot of reasons to be excited, not only on his effectiveness, but exactly how his arsenal looked in particular. Headlined by that fastball that topped out at 97 today, working with that new sweeper. That's a new pitch in his arsenal over this past year. A lot to like there from Christian Scott. I see Shraken again. Nathan, let's see. Vera, how you doing? Everyone chiming in. Greatly appreciate everybody. So now let's start the discussion, everybody. By show of hands, if you watched today's Mets game against the Marlins, give me a raise up right now. Of course, unfortunately, it wasn't on SNY, but you could watch it either through the Marlins feed or they had it there on MLB Network and their local listings. And we saw the Mets win today by a final score of 6-3. And as we take a moment here to look at the lineup before we put a heavy emphasis into obviously the pitching today, which is going to be the bulk of this discussion here, we have Brandon Nimmo leading off in left field today. Tyrone Taylor got the start in center field. Batting third was DJ Stewart in right field, and I'm going to explain why I do not foresee DJ Stewart starting the season in a New York Metropolitan uniform. Luke Voigt there at DH in the 4 spot. Number 5 was Omar Narvaez, who's been having a very solid spring. I got to give him credit where credit's due. I hope that transfers over into the regular season, because if we can get this kind of Omar Narvaez, I don't know how much I'm going to be complaining, if I'm going to be quite frank. Chi-Man Choi batting 6th there at first base. I'm going to tell you why Chi-Man Choi is more than likely going to be the pick between himself and DJ Stewart here shortly. Jose Iglesias, Joey Wendell, and Zach Short to round things out. Zach Short as well has continued to have a very impressive, very low-key spring for the Mets. It's unfortunate in the case of him. Again, you're doing everything you possibly can, similar to Trace Thompson and similar to Jose Iglesias, how these are still guys that are likely on the outside looking in for the bench spot, because you just have more than enough options, basically. And that's a good problem to have if you're the Mets here. It is unfortunate, I will say, in the Trace Thompsons of the world, who, again, did everything he possibly could this spring to warrant being on the team. It just isn't enough at the end of the day when you're comparing what the team need is, what they currently have, and guys in those respective positions. And then you see, Ben Gambles of the world, the same applies. But Jose Iglesias is this big discussion where a lot of Mets fans feel that he is worthy to crack this bench. And while he has had a phenomenal spring, and I don't completely disagree with you, again, a just under 300 average or over 800 OPS, lots to like there from Jose Iglesias, who once again had himself a hit and a run score today. But the unfortunate reality, again, for someone like him is the Mets already have a guy that can play multiple infield positions. He's been looking very good this spring, albeit very limited sample size. And that's the guy they signed to their type of contract, major league contract, and yes, Joey Wendell. Joey Wendell is going to be this year's Luis Guillorme unless he completely falters and the Mets say cut ties with him early, whatever it may be. Joey Wendell is leading the way as basically their utility man that they're going to look upon most in those infield positions before they consider someone like Jose Iglesias. And if you're wondering why exactly that is, that goes directly in hand with one, Joey Wendell's MLB experience, two, Jose Iglesias, while he does have a lot of MLB experience, there's a reason why he hasn't really been a mainstay in the MLB the past 2.5 years. That goes directly in hand with, while he's a high contact hitter, he's a singles hitter that's looked great this spring. He's been going gap to gap. I will give credit where credit's due. Had a walk-off bomb too just the other day. So we've been seeing the ball lifted. That's awesome. But Iglesias, what he's known for is a high contact, solid OBP hitter as well. And can play multiple positions in the infield, but he doesn't have the quickness that he used to. The hands are great, but it's ability to get to the ball in those defensive positions, which is why he's been a negative defensive player in the MLB for the past number of years. That's why he also spent the entire 2023 season in the minor leagues. So Iglesias, while I've been loving what he's been doing this spring, I just don't want fans to jump the gun and get ahead of themselves and think that he's a lock to crack this team, because unless Jose Iglesias was batting like 600 all spring while playing consistently, that he's on the outside looking in. And that goes directly in hand with DJ Stewart and also someone like, yes, that being in, Chi-Man Choi. But before we get there, again, everyone first chiming in live on a replay. How you doing? We're breaking down the latest as the Metropolitans win today by a final score of 6-3. We're going to be highlighting, as you guys see the highlights right there, Christian Scott's masterful 4-inning outing, including 7 strikeouts, only allowing 1 earned run. What stood out so much about his arsenal, we'll get through shortly here through Baseball Savant. But I do want to discuss briefly an announcement that came out earlier today, and that's the status of the Mets rotation for 2024. Folks, it's set. It is ready to go. Tyler McGill has cracked the rotation. He has bested Jose Butto in the eyes of the Mets to begin the year in their rotation. Butto, who is phenomenal all spring long, is a call-up away from either impacting this rotation or potentially impacting this bullpen. And there's a great reality that we could see him called up as soon as the middle of April based on the Mets' current schedule alignment there. So Tyler McGill, who is not going to start the year as the Mets' number 5 per se, reports are indicating that he very well is going to be, yes, their number 3 starter to begin the year, going in hand with, of course, the off day that they have to begin things. Hopefully, there isn't a rain out because the weather, as a surprise, absolutely nobody. It looks like trash for the first series there against the Brewers, the home opener, starting this next Thursday, March 28th. But Tyler McGill, who's looked very sharp all spring, his last outing was his worst on paper. However, he has worked that American sport ball, that new forkball in his mix really well. We've been liking what we've seen with the fastballs on as he's kind of sitting in that 95-plus range. It's when you get into the lower 90s there on the consistent basis with McGill where you start to have problems because he's not able to set up his pitches as well as he used to, right? It isn't really much of a put-out pitch when he's sitting there below 95 on the gun, unless you're dealing with more free swingers like a Javi Baez or wherever it may be. So McGill did enough in order to crack the rotation and begin the season. I agree with that as well. Very happy for him. Excited to see what he can do. But I'm even more excited knowing that the Mets, for the first time in a minute now, have a lot of MLB caliber arms that can impact the Mets and their rotation either as a starter or potentially as a multi to long reliever at various points throughout the regular season. So congratulations to Tyler McGill on cracking the rotation. He will be right in the mix for the Mets to begin the 2024 calendar season. And Jose Butto, again, do not be surprised if he's already in the mix for the Mets by time we get to the middle point of April. That's how soon we could see Jose Butto, barring any injuries that, of course, we're going to knock on wood for. But now, folks, let's talk more on pitching, right? But before we talk more on pitching, I do have to let you all know about our amazing sponsor here on the channel. That, of course, is our great friends at BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
Shout out to BetUS as always, as they have all your sports betting needs. And I will confess, yesterday in our latest segment, I did go with the Padres spread. I had them at +1.5. What that means is the Padres just need to win outright in their 6 a.m. Eastern start game in South Korea against the Dodgers, or they would have had to lose by no more than 1.5 runs. They were in a nice position to do so up until right around that 8th inning when everything opened the floodgates. Of course, a ball went right through Jake Cronenworth's glove. I mean, that is the most ridiculous. That's like a Metsian thing. And the Padres have a lot of Metsian acts that have happened over the years, so they can relate there. That was unfortunate, but that opened the floodgates. The Dodgers ended up winning. So outside of that, we've hit as well big time on the Knicks spreads over the past couple days. The future bets I'd love too. And I want to stay on the future focus right now briefly for my sports bettors. As you guys know, BetUS, we're going to be doing awesome, unique WardyNYM parlays, picks, and props throughout the regular season here, which begins again later next week. So stay tuned. That will break down our post-game shows and see how we did together as a community. Again, please make sure you guys are being safe and responsible in doing this. That's a big thing as well. I do not implore anyone to sports bet if they don't trust themselves, but of course, if you do, if you're composed, know what you're doing, make sure you get in on the action by clicking the link down below. That way, you too get a 125% bonus with your first 3 deposits. It is that easy. Shout out to them as always. But as you see here, I was doing a little bit of a look in their MLB specials, players to hit 30 plus home runs in 2024 season. Folks, they have Francisco Lindor at +150, and the more hilarious thing here, this is free money. Francisco Alvarez, 225. Alvy hit 25 bombs last year. Didn't even start the year with the Mets. Lindor, of course, has been a 30-plus home run bat the past couple years. These are both easy locks for me. We're staying the Mets way. There's a lot of other odds that I absolutely love for you to hammer too that aren't Mets related, but considering this is a Mets stream, let's do exactly that. Francisco Alvarez, 225. This is one of the easiest hammers you could possibly imagine here. We're going to put a hundo down, and that's going to win us 225. You love to see it. I love that play so much. I also love Lindor there at +150 because this also feels like an easy lock for a guy that was nothing short of strictly home runs and doubles all of the 2023 season. Of course, he can get the high contact ability up a little bit too. That wouldn't shock me. But at the same time, I think Lindor is going to continue to be a great gap-to-gap home run power hitter from the shortstop position for the Amazons this year as one of the better power hitters in the game in that regard. So want to make sure that reloads there, and we're all set with bets. Yes, we are. Awesome. Hope you guys get in on those too. Again, they're ridiculous odds. How can you not do that? So shout out BetUS as always. And now as we go back to our main slide, fair warning, my intro will run for a second. I always do that. That's a hiccup on my end, not yours. Apologies in advance. Okay, guys and gals, I also, for whatever reason, I'm not having the YouTube chat pull up, so I'm doing it now. Let's see. How you doing, Grow Big TV? Appreciate you being in here. I see Shraken says, I want to know how you feel about our minor league. I'm very happy about the Mets minor league configuration. Since Steve Cohen has become owner, this is the best it's looking right now. That's really awesome to say. Shraken, Dave, my man, absolute beauty, great member, Explosive, Joseph, Bobby. Joseph, let's see here. K Turub, how you doing? Michael Mass, how you doing? Go Rangers and Mets, absolutely. Guys and gals, also help us get to 50 likes for your next short-term goal here in the live show. Greatly appreciated my 120 plus viewers on YouTube, and I know we got plenty there on Twitter at 250 plus. Appreciate you guys for the endless support, liking, and following. But let's talk about Christian Scott. You see the highlights. This is where I want to break down the young right-hander. He was absolutely tremendous today. As we mentioned, Christian Scott's final line, 4 innings. 2 hit ball, 1 earned run, 0 walks, 7 strikeouts. He allowed that 1 home run, 59 pitches for Christian Scott, who's likely going to be starting the year in the bigs and the AAA level, hopefully for the Mets, if that wasn't officially announced already. I'd imagine it was, but in case it wasn't, I'm assuming that's where he's going to start things for the Amazons. Scott, I understand the Mets have the Joey Lucchese's, the Jose Butos, and of course the Tyler McGills of the world ahead of him, but I really don't think it's going to take terribly long for him to crack the bigs. I think by mid-season, we very well could see Christian Scott impacting this team, if not sooner. And what an awesome outing that we saw from him today. As we take a look at what stood out so much, he had himself a boatload of whiffs today. That's absolutely huge. Had 11 whiffs today. Awesome stuff. Four-seam fastball, as I mentioned, topped out today right around 97. Huge stuff there. Minimum was 94. Sat right around 95 to 96 miles per hour. Sweeper sat right around 84 miles per hour. The slider sat 88 miles per hour. And the changeup, 86 miles per hour. As we take a look at the RPMs for the right-hander, we're sitting on average 2200 there on the fastball. The sweeper, 2500, or even topping out at 2700 that we saw today. The normal slider there we saw at 2,500, just under on the average, and the change up there obviously very different, just over 1,000. But awesome RPMs that we're seeing. You're loving the break, especially that sweeper. My goodness, my God, my gracious. Some of the swing and misses that we saw today from that thing was nothing short of absolutely masterful. And Christian Scott is one of these guys that really came out of nowhere this past year. Like, this is someone that wasn't in the highest rankings of Mets prospects when evaluating their young starting pitching. You, of course, think of guys like Mike Vassell, Blade Tidwell, Calvin Ziegler, even, of course, being a top pick not long ago, Dominic Hamill, Tyler Stewart. The list goes on and on. There's so many exciting guys. Then we see Nolan McLean. We, of course, see Brandon Sproat, flamethrowers as well, that we're really excited about. They're going to skyrocket this year. The same way that those names are going to skyrocket through the farm this year is the same way what Christian Scott did last year. Christian Scott, again, I do not think it's going to take this man long to impact the bigs. And mind you, he was doing this against some MLB caliber batters today. It wasn't like he was just doing this against a bunch of schmucks. He was doing this against Jesus Sanchez, Avisail Garcia, who is a bum in his own right, and he knows he's a bum too. John Birdie, who you see there, Dane Myers. This is the same Dane Myers that had himself a masterful day the other day against the Mets. Christian Bethancourt, who's been having a solid spring. Again, a high contact catcher as well. We'll see how he does this year. Again, it wasn't like he was going up against an all-star lineup as a prospect, but it was still awesome to see the ability for Christian Scott to get the swing and miss the way he did, and to do it on national television as well. For him to be on MLB Network today and carving up the batters the way he did, oh, baby, was that sexy. So my question to everyone watching this, either live on YouTube or live on Twitter, let me know, how long do you think it's going to take Christian Scott to crack the bigs this year? Because he does have the stuff. He has the arsenal. He has the multi-pitch mix. The fact that he has the changeup down as well is huge. He's got everything it takes to be not only an MLB caliber arm, but to be a mainstay in this Mets rotation, potentially as soon as sometime this 2024 calendar season. So to everyone watching live and people on replay, same applies. Make sure to let me know, when do you think Christian Scott is going to be called up this season? I would love to hear it. And continue to smash that like and subscribe on. Really does mean a lot. I thought we had no pitching prospects. That theory has been proven wrong. Correct as well. And you know what? Subway to Shea? Shout to you as always. What a beauty. Expect to see Ant on the channel real soon. Here's what I will say about the prospect evaluation. It is easy at times, especially if you're not going out of your way as a writer, as a young fan, to really look in depth on all these arms and be following them in the minor leagues, to draw those conclusions if you're looking at baseline numbers and knowing what their initial hype was from their drafts. And in the case of a lot of these guys, of course, Blade Tidwell, a lot of hype for sure. Some of these guys far more hype than others. But what we've seen now is that spring breakout game really opened a lot of eyes to fans, which was awesome. I think that did such a tremendous job on doing exactly what we were hoping it would do. Draw eyes to your young talent, the guys in your farm that maybe you don't know too well or just want to learn more about and see what they have. And the conclusions have been awesome. Steve Cohen has said, this is the best farm that I've seen since becoming owner. Like, it feels like we finally have, an embarrassment of riches, essentially. He said something along those lines when evaluating the Mets' young starting pitching. And it also doesn't come as a surprise that the Mets are in the market to trade some of their young talent for young controllable pitching if it seems fit at either some point this season and the offseason, whatever it may be. The Mets now have a lot of creative options now to either stick internal with their options, seek external help as well for more MLB immediate help that can impact them now in the years going forward. The Mets have put themselves in a very good position the past couple of years, and you have to give massive credit where credit's due. Going all the way back to when things first started with Steve Cohen, and, from the Zach Scott era, we saw there what he parted with, to then going into the Billy Epler era, where you were head-scratching with some of the moves he made, but he also did such a great job on at least pouncing on the opportunity to flip guys last trade deadline when they need to. Like, the fact that the Mets got a solid prospect for Tommy Pham as a rental too, awesome. 17-year-old shortstop prospect that there's a lot of excitement with too in the minor leagues. Then you look at the trade for David Robertson. Marco Vargas is deemed by many as a top 10 prospect in the organization already. There's a lot to like there. Then, you bring in Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, who's deemed as the hardest hitter among all Mets minor leaguers that can play first base and corner outfield potentially. Drew Gilbert is expected to crack the bigs at some point this year that we know very well. And then, you have Luis Angel Acuna. You got all these other pieces to add on with the young pitching, and you come to the realization that, yes, the Mets do have themselves a farm that can play. And I think we're going to see from single A, double A to triple A this year, very entertaining baseball, which is something that we really haven't seen all too much there. And especially the triple A level has fluctuated. Of course, Beatty, Vientos, all those guys' rises have been awesome there. But aside from that, it's been great to see the depth that we're now seeing among these different leagues there below the Metropolitans there for the minor leagues. Dave, thank you so much, my man. I will definitely try to make that happen, brother. May 11th versus the Braves sounds great, my friend. I appreciate that. I'll look for the email too, because clearly I didn't see it yet. So thank you so much for the endless support, my man. I hope you're having a great day. What about Nate Lavender? I love Nate Lavender, but Nate Lavender has minor league options, and that's why he's starting the year in the minor leagues. And speaking of the minor leagues, I do want to touch again, as I mentioned, about DJ Stewart and these other guys. But before I do, let's talk a little bit on the offensive end before we'll get to wrapping things up, discussing the bench role, who's going to crack that last spot, and why I think Chi-Man Choi is still the man to beat in that position until proven otherwise. We'll get on to Edwin Diaz here shortly too, but before I do, let's talk briefly about the offense. The offense wasn't crazy today. The Mets had 8 hits to the Marlins 4. They had a 191 expected batting average, so had some luck on their side too, but the man who led the way offensively was a man who I think is going to be tremendous with his power production this year, better than we've seen in years past. I think he's going to get 25, 30 plus home runs this year, and that is the leadoff man himself, and Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo went 2 for 3 today with a double, 3 RBIs, and a walk. Typical Brandon Nimmo. We love to see that. More of that, please. Tyrone Taylor as well got himself a triple today in his one and only hit. Again, solid outfield defense that we saw in center field. Can play right, can play left. Lots of speed, lots of ability on the bags too. I love Tyrone Taylor. He's going to be easily one of my favorites this year. I always kind of have soft spots, especially for those fourth outfielder platoon guys, especially if they're very productive in their limited roles. I think Taylor is going to have endless opportunities for the Mets this year in a good way. Splitting time with Bader, splitting time with Marte at times, and even when you want to give the occasional off day to Nimmo, but hopefully you have him healthy and out there for the majority of the season. Him playing in left field more often than not is going to help in that regard for sure. And then as we saw DJ Stewart, he went 0 for 3 today. Luke Voigt 0 for 2, but did drive in a run and had himself a walk. Omar Narvaez 1 for 4. Omar Narvaez batting .263 with a 707 OPS this spring. Nothing fancy, but again, that is kind of what you're going to get with Omar Narvaez. So I just hope if we're not going to get much power, let's get more of the high contact ability. That's fine. 260 range. I'm not complaining there. And hopefully your defense isn't as putrid as what it was last year. And I don't mean that to completely slide against Omar, but when he returned from injury, I mean, the guy literally looked like he could not handle the backstop position. Francisco Alvarez was doing laps around him, both offensively and defensively. And that says a lot about Francisco Alvarez's growth in such a short period of time, but also says a lot about why you don't necessarily shouldn't invest that much into a catcher where he's automatically going to be your backup like as soon as you sign him, basically. And Omar Narvaez, who of course opted into his $8 million for the 2024 season. Chi-Man Choi went 0 for 4 today, as we saw, with 3 strikeouts. Probably the worst day at the plate I think we've seen from Chi-Man Choi so far this spring. Jose Iglesias 1 for 4 with a run scored and a strikeout, a 294 average, 804 OPS, as I mentioned. Joey Wendell 1 for 2, 2 runs scored, had himself a double and a walk. Like it or not, Joey Wendell is starting the year on the Mets roster, and hey, I will say this, it's limited sample size, like what I'm seeing so far, Joey. If you're going to come in as a defensive late game replacement at times where we need to pinch hit you, but hopefully it's so few and far in between, I'm perfectly fine with him as that defensive replacement later in game if need be. But man, oh man, I do not want to see this man get too many at-bats. But hopefully the Mets, in a limited sample size, as my man Giraffe Neck Mark said in our video that we came out with a couple days ago on predicting the Mets stat leaders for the 2024 season. Make sure to check that out on the channel if you haven't already, folks. A lot of people haven't seen it yet. It was an awesome discussion with Giraffe Neck Mark and my man Mike from Stark Raven Sports, 2 huge Mets fans in the YouTube space as well. And Mark, when picking highest batting average, he went with Joey Wendell. I'm like, what, in at least 10 games for it to qualify, you know, jokingly? But Joey Wendell, again, when he's right, is a higher contact hitter. He has not looked right the past year and a half, 2 years now, so I'm curious to see how he's going to be for the Mets in his limited sample size. But less ABs, the better. More defensive replacements, fine. Joey Wendell, he's having himself a nice spring. rain. Zach Short, same exact stat line pretty much as him today. 1 for 2, 2-run score with a double, an RBI, 2 walks. Zach Short with a 281 average and a 770 OPS. When Zach isn't busy doing an awesome pod that I know that he's been doing, Compound, I think it's called, through John Boy with Ian Happ when he was in the Chicago Cubs organization. When he's not doing that, he's out there being a pretty nice ball player there for the Metropolitans this spring, and is definitely a guy that I think the Mets will have in their mix of infield options that they want to potentially call up at some point this season, should he stay in the organization. There's been a lot to like so far with Zach Short, which I'm not complaining about whatsoever, but also when we look at offensively as a whole today, again, as I mentioned, 8 hits to the Marlins 4. Marlins had 3 runs on their 4 hits. Again, that's going to happen sometimes, especially in spring training. But now we talk about the offense. I do want to talk briefly about Edwin Diaz. And as we shift here just for a second, Edwin Diaz, 0.2 innings today, 1 earned run allowed, 2 walks, 1 strikeout, a 3.38 ERA. I don't care about the ERA or anything like that. What happened with Edwin Diaz today? He was just a little flat. You know, he pitched a decent amount of pitches today. Again, 21 pitches on the count today. This was an Edwin Diaz that I was honestly expecting to see sooner. I was pleasantly surprised to see Edwin come out in his debut that I witnessed in person at Port St. Lucie a couple weeks ago, and to see right before my very eyes a man who was the best reliever in baseball last time he was on the mound look exactly like that again. Now we saw Edwin Diaz look like Edwin Diaz that, again, we are going to see at times, and I'm not concerned about this in the slightest. Edwin today, as we saw with the fastball, topped out 98 today, you know, a couple ticks down. It's spring training. I don't want him to unload the entire thing. Slider sat right around 90, 91 there on the gun, and what we saw too with him today was, again, just giving up a little bit more contact that we're accustomed to, but struggling to locate the zone was the thing, right? Now, you shouldn't even say contact, because it was really just the walks today that we saw with Edwin Diaz that were the bigger bugaboo for him, because he didn't even allow 1 hit, right? So Edwin Diaz, this was just an inning where he got worked, and honestly, I'm kind of happy it happened, only because I think it's a better thing for him to get worked a little bit prior to the season beginning versus, say, him literally lighting the world on fire, allowing nothing whatsoever heading into the regular season, because then you want to know how is he going to respond if he doesn't get shaken up a little bit. But the one thing I will say about Edwin Diaz and why I'm so impressed with him and what his projection and really his growth rather has been since he arrived with the Mets in 2019 is his ability to adapt, evolve, and right wrongs. 2019, when he first came in as a Mets closer, the guy could not locate to save his life. I witnessed more than enough. We all did. Blown saves. That just should not have happened in person, in Philly, whether it was watching on TV, in Queens at Citi Field. It was just putrid. If you had the fastball, you didn't have the slider. If you had the slider, you didn't have the fastball. Very frustrating first year for Edwin Diaz. 2020 shortened campaign, looking much more solid in a smaller sample size, albeit. 2021, Edwin Diaz, sneaky, one of the better relievers in all baseball. Looking very sharp. Again, not the most dominant Edwin Diaz we've ever seen, but a more comfortable one out there that's able to handle things a bit better. But what we noticed in 2021 with Edwin Diaz, do not pitch this man on back-to-back days. Do not pitch this man in non-save outings. It is a death sentence. We get to 2022. Edwin Diaz comes out and is like, you know what? I'm going to go back to being quite literally the best reliever in baseball. He did exactly that. When you double basically your K per 9 from the average Joe out there, it was ridiculous what Edwin did. And it's awesome to see him continue to look exactly like he was in 2022. The stuff is still very much there. Everything is looking exactly the same. I'm not overly concerned with the command or anything like that. But I do think we're going to see outings, especially in the first couple months of the season, where you do see Edwin Diaz, again, not be completely lights out. He's going to get roughed up from time to time. Not that I wish it. I just think it will inevitably happen naturally for a guy that's coming back from still being gone for a year with injury and not being in high leverage situations at the MLB level in that period of time. I think it's not going to be anything too cause for concern for Edwin. He's going to overcome this battle. Getting back to his injury, looking the way he has been tremendous. But I just want to put that out there once more. If Edwin does get roughed up every now and then, the last effing thing I want to hear, if I hear from one schmuck saying that Edwin Diaz is cooked again throughout the first couple months of the season or anything like that, unless he clearly has the yips and he is getting the doors blown off of him every single time out there, I don't want to hear a damn word. If I do, you're a schmuck, and that's that. I got to give plenty of leash to Edwin Diaz. He deserves it. And yes, I know he's making the big bucks, but still, he deserves all of it from what he's done. And his mental strength, his fortitude, his ability to overcome the obstacles he's done since arriving in Queens is truly the most impressive thing. One of the most impressive things I've seen from Mets currently on this roster. That's what separated him from the rest. Not just the dominant stuff with the fastball and the slider, but it's how he goes about himself. And when I interviewed my man Trevor May, that was on the channel a couple months ago, to break down the Mets bullpen for the 2024 season, he said how charismatic, how loose Edwin is in the clubhouse. You know, Trevor, they're all out there really taking their time to get it locked in. Edwin can be joking with you, playing cards or whatever, and then when it's time to go, he locks in right away. You know, he just flips the switch. Some guys have it, some guys don't. Edwin does, and that's why I'm still beyond ecstatic for him this season. I truly believe that he very well can be one of the best relievers in baseball still, and I expect him to do that to an extent this season. I really do. There we go. Oh, the intro didn't run. Let's go. That means I finally did it. I finally turned off the intro there for a second. You love to see it. But before we get on to the final segment, before wrapping things up, I do want to see what comments you guys got for me. Ricky, how you doing? We just been going over everything. He will pitch in AAA game tomorrow. Sounds good, and you'll love to hear it as well. I agree. Chi-Man Choi should be on this team to start. Yes, we're going to get a Chi-Man Choi here in 1 second. Before I do just that, appreciate everyone that's been watching live on a replay for the latest Mets post-game breakdown here as the Metropolitans win again, and they went fishing today against those Miami Marlins by a final score of 6-3. It was headlined by Christian Scott, Mets top pitching prospect, going 4 innings and 1 hit, 7 strikeout ball. You'll love to see that, and hopefully we can see more of that from Christian Scott here at the MLB level sooner rather than later. When I said 1 hit, I meant 2 hits, 1 run, 7 Ks. How you doing? Where you been? Where you going? Christian Scott, happy to see you with an awesome outing today. Let's see here. I am pissed that I missed this start, but I'm not at all surprised. The kid Scott is a stud. Miguel, here's the thing. If you miss it, you can come here. We can talk about it. You can see some highlights. Have some discourse in the chat. So it isn't the end of the world, right? And I appreciate you chiming in. Same thing to everyone that's watching live on YouTube right now. On Twitter. Right now, we're at 400 concurrent on Twitter. Right now, we're at just under 200 on YouTube. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Am I crazy? I just feel we will overperform this year and make playoffs. I think the Mets are definitely going to overperform to an extent. And when I mean overperform, I mean in the sense of a lot of fans are so doom and gloom on the Mets this year. A lot of fans really were just tapped out as soon as the offseason started. And this Mets team without expectations is going to surprise a lot of people this year. No. Do I expect them to win the World Series? God, no. Do I even think that they're a lock to make playoffs? No. I think that they have some hurdles in their way. And that's why I felt the way that I have about still wanting to add, and why I know they're more than likely going to be a buyer at the trade deadline, adding in those areas where you could argue they could still rightfully add right now. But I digress. This Mets team, I think, is going to surprise plenty of people this year. And more than anything, they're just going to be entertaining. There's going to be an entertainment factor to them that we didn't see at all last year. That drove us all nuts. I mean, I'm someone who has prided myself on being consistent with post-game coverage, breaking down, having live callers, doing all these fun things with you guys in the community, and it was so hard to do it so early on last year. I was ranting in the first month of the season, and the worst part is that the same struggles and the same rants that I was ranting about in April stayed consistent throughout the entirety of the season, leading up to them being sellers there at the trade deadline. I really hope that isn't the case again, because man, oh man, that gets fans tapped out fast, checked out fast, and to cover it on a night-to-night basis, I just want there to be not only optimism, but reasons to be excited and to break down the team. Even in the losses, I know we're going to have some terrible losses this year, for sure. Even, again, remember, even the Mets, if everything goes right, say God willing, they had a 90-win season, they just pulled it out of their ass, right? They still need to lose a boatload of games. It still inevitably is going to happen, even if they say one at absolute best 90. I see them, of course, in the 80s range, but will be low 80s, the high 80s. That is where trade deadline very well could make the difference for them, and ultimately can be that X factor in making playoffs or not. Let's see. 430 Sasco, Zach Short is best option. Appreciate the donation, my man. Braden, appreciate the $2 holla. The love. Zach Short's fun. Don't get me wrong. I do like Zach Short for sure. He is someone that, again, I could see impacting this Mets team this year if he is, in fact, going to stay in the organization. Now let's get into why, to the Zach Short truthers, to the DJ Stewart lovers, to the Jose Iglesias believers, and not only his music that he's been coming out with, but his play. I'm here to tell you that from everything that we've been seeing at this point, it's been widely reported, it would be surprising if Chi-Man Choi doesn't start the year on the Mets bench. I will say, however, do I think Chi-Man Choi has outperformed other guys competing for that bench spot? Not necessarily in the case you could argue for Iglesias and Short, But here's the thing. How much does that matter? Because the Mets, they've said it themselves. David Stern said it himself that he only cares so much about spring performance, right? So when it comes to these position battles, this is where you have the fun debates, where we have the great discourse. Because Chi-Man Choi, why I've been a firm believer why he is going to crack this Mets bench is because of the following reasons. I've been saying it every day, and I will say it again until we find out that Chi-Man Choi does not crack the Mets bench, because I'm pretty confident that he will. It's a couple things. One, it's his track record. Chi-Man Choi, when healthy, is a very solid defensive first baseman. Offensively, can provide power for you. He can hit in that 15 home run range plus, hopefully, if you're looking for that as well. It would be awesome if we could get him in a bigger role than that, but you don't want him in a bigger role than that either, right? Because that means he's getting consistent at-bats. Chi-Man Choi is, at the end of the day, a guy that you would want off the bench, and at times in platoon options. It's a lefty power bat that can do what Daniel Vogelbach was so scared to. Actually take the bat off your shoulders. 1, lift the ball. 2, and drive it. Pull it. That is what Chi-Man Choi can do very well. He's one of the harder hitters in all Major League Baseball. He's one of the best eyes at the plate, too. Can get on base at a good clip. He's an awesome personality as well for the clubhouse. And again, can back up Pete Alonso at first base comfortably, far more than any other current option the Mets have. And I assure you, the Mets care more about that than maybe you realize, because even though Pete Alonso is going to play the bulk of the season at first base, there's still a reality where you're still going to see him DH, whether it's for 10, 20 games, or whatever it may be. And in those instances, the Mets want to make sure that they have protection at that position. So as things currently stand, Chi-Man Choi is leading the way in that regard. DJ Stewart, what is against him right now is a couple things. And the main things is that minor league option he still has left. 2, he hasn't had a spring training to warrant saying, oh my goodness, he absolutely needs to be on this roster because he's performed well enough. No. Yes, you look at the sample size from last year, and that's awesome, but it was still a small sample size that he had. And you have to look at bigger picture here. Being the 5th outfielder already on the team with Tyrone Taylor, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Harrison Bader all ahead of you, all those factors come into play too. Even for a guy that profiles best at DH, I think you can argue that even goes again. That's why things could be more of a difficulty here. Because while the Mets are likely going to have an interchanging DH throughout the year, aside from Mark Vientos, who should hopefully get the most consistent reps, they do want to have some positional diversity there for guys like Starling Marte and others. What you still have a problem with at the end of the day is that 1, other guys don't have minor league options the way that DJ Stewart does, and 2, he cannot handle any infield positions the way that Chi-Man Choi at least can. Now you get into Jose Iglesias, Zach Short. Again, we've talked about the pros and cons of both of them. Zach Short, again, great glove, can play all over the infield. You love that, right? Problem is, the Mets already have a guy, major league caliber, that they've signed to a major league deal that they definitely have a little bit more faith in, and Joey Wendell. Carlos Mendoza said it yesterday that Wendell's the guy that, like him, Tyrone Taylor, they're locks. Like, they're already in that position, right? So that's why I think Zach Short is still on the outside looking in. Jose Iglesias, I think, is on the outside looking in because of the same reason why he hasn't been a consistent MLB player for a number of years now. It doesn't have to do with what he's done in spring. It's, if anything, spring has made things a little bit more difficult for the Mets in their decision-making. But similar to Trace Thompson, I do believe we're going to find ourselves in the same category where, yes, they look great in spring, but they're still on the outside looking in to crack the bench to begin their regular season. Doesn't mean that they can't impact the Mets at any point this year, but we also need to remember spring performances only mean so much, guys, right? Tim LeCastro was leading the way for the Mets offensively last spring. And what impact did he have on the Mets last season? Enlighten me. What do you mean? You can't tell me anything? It's almost like he didn't do anything, right? And I know injuries one in hand, but even Tim LeCastro at his best, you know what you're getting. Getting a speed demon that sometimes can hit gap to gap, is very much a singles hitter, a bunt single machine. That is Tim LeCastro, right? So the same way that you can evaluate these veterans that have looked great this spring, just bear in mind this is bigger than just spring training results. Could it be making things a little bit difficult for the Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns? Absolutely. Of course, it changes things up a little bit. But still, as things currently stand, I think that this is Chi-Man Choi's job to lose. And if he loses it, then we will gladly have that discussion, right? It's awesome to hear that the rotation is solidified now. Tyler McGill's right in the heart of that thing to begin the year. Jose Buto will be the next man called up. Will not take him long to get called up either. I think he's going to be very impactful for the Mets this year. And then as we get on to offensively, again, the lineup we saw yesterday, that is a configuration that you can really expect a lot throughout the year. Hopefully, we just don't see as much McNeil batting clean off right off the riff as we do see other things. Let's see here. Okay, I just saw an update from Joel Sherman. I saw Mets and Montgomery, so I just pounced right away and made sure I wasn't missing anything there. To everyone that's been watching, though, thank you all so much for being here. I do really appreciate it. That is about going to wrap up the live show. Again, I've going way too long-winded for a spring win the other day. Even with Kristen Scott's brilliance, even while we had plenty to break down, I appreciate everyone that took the time to watch us live on YouTube, people that watch on Twitter as well. And make sure to my Twitter viewers, again, if you want to interact with the live shows as well, share your opinions, all that fun stuff, make sure you're chiming in to the YouTube version. I'm just toying with this as well because Twitter, the algorithm's been working awesome so far. Another way to, of course, continue to build the platform. And ultimately, I want to see as many of you guys that I can interact with as possible. So today, total 200 on YouTube. I mean, we're topping out 440, 450 on Twitter. Can't complain there. So I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you guys so much for letting me be your one-stop shop for all your Mets post-game needs. And stay tuned. We got a lot of awesome content coming. We will be having a season preview show come out sooner than later before the regular season begins, obviously. We may have another video or two, individual video content that has to do with the Mets for the 2024 season. And then before you know it, we got our post-game shows rolling out on a night-to-night, day-to-day basis. So I hope to see you guys and gals then. Until then, have a great rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. This is your boy Wardy signing out. Let's go Mets, baby.